please welcome on stage, in the order of their seats, ANDRZEJ CZARNY, Steve POOLE from IBM, CUPRAK, and ALVARO MUÑOZ. We're going to be talking about security, so I'll expect most of the fun questions to come from you, but we're going to put it. Okay, so I'll ask the first question.
Can I ask the first question?
Of course.
Who's missing?
He's gonna join with us shortly.
Okay, just thought it was a mystery guest.
Well, I want to ask this. Can we stay secure in the current day and age? With all the security threats coming from everywhere, you read the news, half of the news are about something being hacked, personal data leaking, and like, you name it. Is there a solution to this? Is there a world where, in the future, this is being handled in a better way? What do you think? Please, Steve.
Okay, so I believe I've read that the answer is yes, we will get it all fixed, but they're talking about our children's children benefiting, right? Okay. Because of the scale. So I think we can say, yes, we know what to do, but it's an enormous job, and we have ignored or been just ignorant of a lot of the challenges for a long time, right? And let's be honest, if the cyber crime and the espionage and all this stuff had not been escalating, we probably would not have done any of the things that we're being asked to do now.
Okay, so you're saying, oh yeah, somebody else wants to answer?
Can I disagree a little bit? Because I think it's like a constant race, right? Between the good guys and bad guys, let's say. And we can be only just a little bit better than the bad guys to win the game in general. Because, so I had this description that if you want to be good in security, you have to be just better than the competition, because in general then they will be easier to target than you. Which is quite an interesting point of view, but I have the negative feeling that it won't be possible to solve the case completely, because as soon as we progress with another fixes for the code, or we solve some issues, the new issues will arise.
Yeah, so I agree that it's never going to go away, but I think the hope is that we can make the difference between their abilities and our abilities get closer. Right? And a lot of it is because we don't think like the bad guys. And once we start thinking like the bad guys and understanding the consequences of our actions, it will get better, or start to get better.
That's true.
Okay, I have a follow-up for Steve, who is optimistic.
Yeah, I'm fairly optimistic that we'll be able to address it. I think part of the problem, though, is that too many people today still don't consider security. It's not a high priority unless somebody's actually trying to hack in. I bet that a lot of, I don't know how many of you use tools right now that track all of your dependencies and tell you, on a daily basis whether something has been found in one of your dependencies. I run the Connecticut Java Users Group, and one of the nearby companies is Sonatype, which maintains Maven and Maven Central. And they have a tool that allows you to see, they take all the certs and security exploits, and you can see for any one of your dependencies whether there's an exploit on a version that you're using currently in production. And they actually maintain statistics for all of the, they can see who's downloading what from Maven Central. And there are people that are today that are still downloading the version of struts, in their daily builds that Equifax got hacked, and I think practically every American had their identification stolen. And I know that talking to the guy that runs the company, they'll go into banks and say, you know, you need this, and they say, oh, we don't use that. You know, we don't use that particular library, we don't use struts. And he says, well, you downloaded it 100 times this morning already. And so, you know, I think it has to, I mean, you have one thing where people aren't tracking what the potential exploits are, and then you have processes that get in the way where you want to roll out a fix for a security exploit, but it'll take, you know, a month for the change orders to go through and for you to get approval to make something that should be put in. It's a no-brainer and it has to be fixed today, because otherwise the only reason it hasn't been hacked is because of obscurity. So
I'm going to add to the negativity, even though I'm being positive about this. So you talked about Maven. The other place that where you end up saying, yeah, you're using an old version and you know it. You have situations, which I think we've probably all done, where you create fat jars which contain all your dependencies all wrapped up, right? And then you never change it. So you take a vulnerability around and it's almost impossible to find unless the tools are really, really good. Okay. So modules is your answer.
Yeah, well, I kind of agree that this is, well, my point of view is I'm a little bit pessimistic here because I don't think that perfect security exists, which means that it doesn't matter how many resources you put in defending your applications, like Equifax, for example. It's always a matter of the attackers having more resources, more time. There are many more than the resources you have in your company to play defense. And that means that they have many more time and people attacking your application if they are targeting your applications. So with that, you have to do your best to protect your applications, your environment and so on, but always concentrate on mitigating the risk. The fact that Equifax got hacked, yeah, you can blame it on the struts. Actually, I'm one of the researchers that found this vulnerability and reported it to struts back in February. And it took like 4 months for them to patch. But it's always, it's not, you cannot blame them because it took them 4 months to patch. It's hard to patch, especially a struts application where you have to recompile the whole binaries and deploy them. So the problem here is that they were not prepared for being hacked, and they were not having any inner defenses to mitigate the risk. I mean, you can get your application hacked. That's not a big deal these days, but that doesn't mean that you can get your entire network compromised just because one of your outer applications got hacked. You have to put defenses, correlation, some measures in between to prevent that further compromise. So yeah, I'm a little bit pessimistic. I think that there are a lot of things you can do. You can play, like for example, making sure you are that you're not using a security dependency with security or non-security vulnerabilities, but it doesn't assure you that it's not containing any 0 days or unknown vulnerabilities. So yeah, I don't know if you find my answer a little bit pessimistic, but I think it's a matter of defense in depth. It's not just protecting dependencies, running a static analysis, pen testing, and so on. You have to prepare for the worst and be quick at reacting to any compromise. First of all, you need to detect the attack. Most of these companies don't even detect the attack after months and months of being compromised, and that's a problem. So you have to have some sensors in your network to detect those attacks and act quickly and react quickly.
Thank you, Alvaro. I'll ask a follow-up question to the first one. Most of you mentioned issues with dependencies being vulnerable, and that's, I think, personally is the biggest, the top one issue that you should concentrate on. But can you please list 1 or 2 that you think are next on the list in terms of what to do in order not to get hacked or mitigate risk, as Alvaro said?
So in terms of vulnerabilities, if you focus in the OWASP top 10, I think dependency is like A9, so the 9th element in your top 10 things to care about. I'm not saying that OWASP top 10 is perfect. I mean, you have to adapt OWASP top 10 to your technology stack. Maybe some of the vulnerabilities don't even make any sense with your technology stack.
I just want to say OWASP.10 is an open website, like Wikipedia for security researchers to analyze security risks and order them every year. So for example, there is OWASP for web for 2014, for 2015. They list all of the top 10 vulnerabilities, what they are, because I don't know how many of you know exactly what cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery is. So if you don't know any of these, this is a good place to start. And they update them every year. And this is true for web and also mobile. Please continue.
Yeah, but this OWASP top 10 focused on AppSec vulnerabilities. That is injection attacks like SQL injection, cross-site scripting issues, deserialization attacks, and so on. Things like not protecting or not mitigating your dependency vulnerabilities. But you have to take into account that many of these companies that got hacked, it's not a matter of they having a SQL injection in some of their external web applications, but maybe they have just one employee that clicked on an email and then they got compromised. They are already in the internal network, and from there they can pivot into any other server. So security is not just AppSec. You have to consider security as a whole. It's network security, it's employee security, and it's AppSec security. I'm an AppSec guy, so I will tell you that the most important one is, scanning your application, making sure that they are secure. But even if you have the perfect and most secure application, they can find other ways to get in through, fooling some of your employees, just dropping some USB with some malware in your parking lots and things like that. So you have to prepare for a hack and be really prepared.
Thank you.
And I was going to say educating employees on good coding practices. I go back to a couple of years ago. I was conducting interviews, and I asked one of the interviewees, they claimed to be an expert in encryption, what he was encrypting, and he claimed he worked at a bank, that the user account passwords for the database, which didn't quite make any sense. So drilled a little further and found out that he was using, I said, so what are you using for that? And he said base 64. So let's just say we didn't hire him, and I think I got my retirement covered. But anyway, education and making sure you have to keep up on stuff, and you have to know when you don't know enough when you're working with security. And go out and ask, am I doing this right? And just don't assume that everything that you find on Stack Overflow is correct and gives you the correct advice.
This is a very good point about education. Can you suggest some starting points that are more correct than Stack Overflow as a start to educate oneself?
So the one, there's like the CWE website where you can get a whole bunch of anti-patterns for coding. Anything else there is? For Java, there's the Java Secure Coding Guidelines, which is something to take to bed because you want to go put it to sleep, but it's still worthwhile looking at. And I think actually if you start digging, you'll find there's lots of good information there about it, about how to do it right. Personally, I think the thing that we need to wake up to, and I'm really glad we're doing this panel because it shows it's happening, is as a community we are very trusting of each other. Right? We have an open source community, we take code, we share, we talk, and that's brilliant. But we also have to be careful about when we're consuming code, we understand things like provenance and stuff like that. So a good example will be, maybe you're running a GitHub project and some guy turns up and is really helpful, helping you maybe he's doing merges or whatever, he's just being helpful. You don't know much about him, he's really useful, he's really helpful. You never know, sometimes these guys, what they're trying to do is get some exploits added to your code in the source repository, right? Because then it gets built and it gets shipped. So that's going to be very rare, but it's you starting to think about the people you're working with and the code that you're taking, how much you trust it, right? And I think that's, unfortunately, we have to start getting into that mindset. All the social engineering we've talked about being phished, all this stuff. Everybody goes, as developers, we tend to think of phishing as those wonderful things you get from Nigeria where it says, you won the lottery, but those ones are aimed specifically at people who aren't particularly bright, right? And they don't want to have a conversation with somebody who is particularly bright because they want them to fall for the fish. We, as individuals, as software developers, are likely to get targeted in ways that are more sophisticated, right? The chances are that if you work for a corporation, that at least once you'll have seen an email that made you think about, was that real or not, right? So it's us being more realistic about what's going on and being more, what's the word? Not less trusting, but more critical about what's happening.
From my point of view, I think it's mostly our companies also, they are not forcing people to think about security. So I will have one question maybe to the audience. Can you put your hands up if you have any security training in the recent year?
Okay, some hands.
All right, that's good. So, and maybe another question, do you think about security when you are coding in your daily basis job? Cool, all right, that's not, well, it's not bad. So, as,
that wasn't all the same hands.
yeah, well, what I would like to say that for me, it's nice to have a hands-on experience. So there are things like Juice Shop, for example, where you can really learn how those 10 top vulnerabilities works and how you can hack into the specifically not secure web page, which is when you can run it locally and then test your knowledge. And in general, if you know how bad guys behave, you can also understand what kind of protection you require. Because for me, it's really scary that the top 10 the SQL injection, all the other injections are still on top for like, what, 10 years or whatever from the start. So we almost have the same vulnerabilities and no one is trying to do something about it.
Okay, thank you for your points. I'd like to continue on one point made from Steve, that developers think that phishing hits mostly not so bright people. And in general, I would say there is a lot of security advice, as you said, on the internet. Let's talk about you shouldn't download a file from an email from an unknown person and open it, right? Everybody knows that. But when the card is a greeting or a Christmas card and your mom is, oh, somebody has thought about me, like there is kind of a small kid wanting to have a cake and you're telling me you cannot have a cake. And this is, with the phishing, it's only a small part of it, because for, let's say, app security on mobile phones, we know that if you're security conscious, you shouldn't install apps that have too many permissions that you're not okay with them having. But how many of you install apps, then go to settings and disable those permissions after they install an app that they don't feel is much trustworthy? Like, there's, I would say, the security guidelines on one side that say, basically, you can't touch anything, you're gonna get hacked. And on the other side, there are people who want to get work done. And how do you find the balance between the two? If that makes sense.
So I've seen people really paranoid about phishing, and I'm not going to click on any links. And then these same people, they want to install a library because they want to get some job done, and they Google for something. This library does exactly what I need. And in order to install it, I just have to run this curl, sh, and I'm doing that even though I'm not clicking on any phishing attempt. So I'm this kind of security-minded guy, but then they use any unknown dependencies on Maven that can run arbitrary code, or they download any package from NuGet just because they are looking for a library, and this library happens to do exactly what I need, so I'm just going to install it. And you know, you have to be really paranoid. It's not just a matter of phishing. They can get in like through many different ways, especially attacking or targeting the developers, because they execute, or we execute so many code in our machines. It's kind of easy to, you know, to Trojan something and get in, and then because we are developers, we have source code of our company, and from there it's kind of game over.
I'm just nodding because it's that bad. Right. Yeah. So you think about phishing. the other thing you have to remember is that the guys who are attacking us aren't just developers, they have industry knowledge. So they're very good at crafting attacks based on industry knowledge. So you can't assume that if you get an email, it can be very close to being reality. If you're in some business, you can get an email that looks very much like what your business would expect, right? Because they understand the business. This is organized, they're out to get us, and they are looking at your weaknesses and exploiting them, and they do it all the time. I mean, it's just stupidly horrific. So another classic one is, the thing they'll do is they will research you. So social engineering isn't just phishing, it's tracking you on Facebook. It's going to see what your opinion of your boss is, or your workers, or what's going on. You leak information about what's happening in your workplace, they can use that against you, right? If you don't like your boss, right? If you really, or you're frightened of your boss, and you talk about it on Facebook, one of the classics would be to send you some email that's very aggressive that comes from this guy telling you to do something which you might not do, but you might do in this case because you're frightened of him, right? And that's what social engineering is about. It's not just, phishing. It's scary.
Actually, I just was going to add with the social engineering aspect of it, they're actually getting very sophisticated with the attacks. I know that at Dassault, they actually strung together the voice of our CEO, trying to instruct the CTO to wire money for a company purchase, where they actually they simulated his voice, right? Saying that he needed this done immediately, and so forth. So I think we're past the point right now where, it's a badly worded email, that looks, I've gotten phishing attempts where everything on it looks legitimate except for one link, right? Or, they've evidently researched where I've gone to school. So they're definitely, the game has definitely been stepped up quite a bit that you have to worry about it. But the phishing attempts now have gotten to the point where they can simulate audio. So, I know that I've gotten mobile calls from my wife. That's not my wife. Those are sales calls. But, they can spoof phone numbers. They can spoof, unless I'm initiating the call. I don't want, if somebody called me up, I would not give them any information.
Yeah, that's a good point, that it started with email, then it continued with texts and voice, and I'm pretty sure now there was some research that the text messages that, for example, most security-minded people use for two-factor authentication are actually not that secure, because an attacker can easily get the messages that are delivered to your phone and use the code to, let's say, sign into your Google while you're while you're trying to log in. So Alvaro mentioned that you have to be paranoid, but now we are talking about emails from your wife and calls from your wife, and that you should be paranoid about those two. So
yes.
Do you feel that the future of humanity is being paranoid about everybody around you, not using social networks, not sharing your information online so that you cannot be fished on and socially engineered on? Like, how does this future look like?
I don't know.
Let's just turn the internet off, shall we, and go home, yeah. It is scary, but so much of it, I think, is we're on the back foot because we are not aware of it and not thinking, right? It's like, who heard about, when Alexa came out? There was this great story about people using Alexa, because you can wire up to smart homes to do locks and things. People were shouting through the door saying, "Alexa, open the door," right? And that's because they created this to be very helpful, but didn't think about those sorts of consequences. So I would say, I'm glad that we're having this conversation, and this is the journey we need to get onto, is thinking about how the stuff that we create can be exploited and being better at dealing with that. And that's, I think, the journey that we need to start. Yeah.
For the phishing campaigns, I would like to add that our education is also important. So I really like what our InfoSec is doing. So they are sending us fake phishing messages, trying to force us to think about it before you click on the link. Because if you click on the link, then you will have your, not name, but your entire section of the visible that, okay, 10 people from this place were able to click on the link, 10 people from the other one were able to click on the link, and then you start thinking if when you're receiving strange messages, should I click it, or should I first think about what's inside?
So on a positive thing, if you want to get your head into this space, there are lots of online security hacking competitions that you can participate in, and large companies sometimes will run these things. So you can go start getting your head into that space, and that's quite worthwhile doing, as long as you don't go too far.
Questions from the audience? Please raise your hand. Yes, microphone please.
Mostly, till now, we were talking about those attackers as persons or even companies. But right now, we're experiencing a boom in artificial intelligence, neural networks, and machine learning. So we all know this could be used for hacking stuff. How are we going to protect ourselves about this?
So they're already using AI to hack systems, but they're also using AI to create defenses as well. And there are competitions out there for that to take place where you can see the programs where you have one against the other. So AI is our savior.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Other questions? Oh, one over there.
Hello, I'm Martin. I think that for now you talked only about the bad things in World Wide Web insecurity. Don't you think that sometimes the insecurity of the World Wide Web has benefits?
That's a good question.
So I think I'll say no.
I can say yes to
You
that.
can say yes. So I know what you mean, but it's the reality of the situation is for a long time the answer has been we didn't have to worry about it, and we've accepted it open. We can still share stuff. It isn't about the sharing; it's about the inappropriate sharing when people steal your data. So you're quite entitled, and we should still be sharing things on GitHub and things like that, and mailing lists. That shouldn't go away. I don't think that we're arguing that we should shut everything down, but we're saying the systems that we use can and should be better.
I think some people on the stage would not have work if there was no security issues, like you pointed out.
Yes, of course, but I mean, sometimes hackers attack politicians and we can see some lies. For example, this is a benefit maybe.
Well, I think you have to have both sides of it, not only one of the politicians getting hacked. Yeah, so, I mean, if everybody, with politicians, I forget what I was watching, on the flight here I was watching a movie, The Circle, right, where they had politicians at the end of it, in it, where they were going to share every minute of their life, right? And so I think that if you did find out like how government actually worked, I forget, there was a Connecticut senator or representative that said that he was going to give his students, he was a college professor that got elected, and he taught political science, and he said he was going to refund all of his students because what he taught and how it actually worked were two different things. But I think it's a little bit more messy, at least taken from the political side, for how things actually get done. And then if you did see everything, that would not necessarily be the case. But selectively hacking and releasing information, sways what people think, right? And then you become, I mean, it's not legitimate. You're saying that it was hacked. And I think with some of the documents that were hacked like last year, incorrect things were actually inserted into them. So you have, it's like a lie's best wedge between two truths. Because if you are releasing information that's hidden, how do you know that that was actually the information that was released, right? And I think that holding politicians accountable, there are better ways to hold politicians accountable than have somebody breaking in and stealing stuff. And so forth. I think that that's, it's being done for a particular aim, not necessarily, it was done for a particular political aim, not necessarily to improve the process.
Okay, and I want to ask one more thing. Don't you think that we need to change our thinking to improve our security? I mean, don't we need to include these things in education of the children, for example? Because if you don't want to hack anyone, you're not going to. And we would not need to be safe, because no one is going to attack us. So maybe we need to change the people's thinking, which is probably impossible, but we should try maybe. What do you think?
I think that it's the most important part, right? We also have to think about security as professionals, but also we have to include it in our early education, because if it's earlier, then better.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're all probably guilty of, might be careful at work and then go home and do things that perhaps when, we have weaker passwords and stuff like that, and we let our kids use our laptops and phones and things like that. So I think we should be better ourselves, but I do agree that we're not very good at educating the next generation about all these threats, right? Even the simple things like just explain to them how to do sort of basic data hygiene and keep things safe. I don't think we ever educate anybody. In fact, the general public are probably mostly completely ignorant. We're the ones that know something, but they probably don't know anything at all.
I'm going to be a little optimistic here, and I think that there is a huge change in the last years. At least when I was at the college, I didn't get any security training, any security classes, and anything like that. If you took part of a CTF, a capture the flag game, it was just few teams playing these games. So in the last, let's say, 7 years, this has changed a lot. Capture the flag games that are games, security or hacking games that all of you can play, now are very popular, and they get played by thousands and thousands of teenagers and students. And these people are going to be the most brilliant in the college, because they are ahead of the rest of the students, because they are already knowing how to hack and how to defend since they are very young. And that has changed a lot. And now, at least in my country, in Spain, most of the big universities, they now have security courses and trainings. So in the last 5 to 7 years, things have changed a lot. So I expect that in the next 5 years, it's going to even change more, and it's going to improve a lot, and that all of us, or all the new generations, are going to be trained in security as they are in development. They are going to take more importance there.
Yeah. Thank you, Alvaro, for the positive point. And I would like to finish our discussion here. So thanks to our panelists. Please, your applause.